You're standing in a burning palace, and the man who ordered it is watching from horseback, perfectly calm. His name is Ying Zheng, and he's about to erase 5 kingdoms from the map. By the time he's done, 600,000 soldiers will have marched under his banner in one single campaign. He isn't just winning wars, he's building something no one's ever seen before. One country, one law, one language, one ruler, for the first time in history. And to protect it, he'll bury an army of clay soldiers deep underground. But the real war he can't win is the one against his own death. That obsession is what finally kills him. Let's go back to where it all starts. A boy who was never supposed to be king. His father was a hostage prince, traded between warring states like a bargaining chip. His mother, once a merchant's mistress, schemed her way into the royal court. Then, at just 13, that boy became king of Qin. But a boy king with no real power is a target, not a ruler. Real control belonged to his regent, a powerful minister named Lu Buwei. Behind closed doors, plots were already forming to remove the boy entirely. At 22, the young king finally struck first. He crushed a rebellion led by his own mother's lover. Then he exiled Lu Buwei, the man who'd controlled him for years. For the first time, the throne of Qin truly belonged to him. And what he wanted next was almost unthinkable. China wasn't one country back then, it was 7 kingdoms locked in endless war. For over 200 years, they'd been slaughtering each other for territory. Historians call it the Warring States period, and it earned that name in blood. Qin was the westernmost kingdom, tough, disciplined, and hungry for more. Ying Zheng decided he wouldn't just win the next war, he'd end all of them. His plan was simple and brutal: destroy the 6 other kingdoms, one at a time. His secret weapon wasn't just soldiers, it was a philosophy called legalism. Harsh laws, brutal punishments, absolute obedience. That was the system. Break a law in Qin, and the punishment could cost you a limb or your life. It was terrifying, but it built the most efficient war machine in the world. Every farmer, every family, every village existed to feed that machine. And in 230 years, the machine finally moved. The first kingdom to fall was Han, the weakest of the 7. It barely took a year before its king surrendered. Next came Zhao, and Zhao's terror of Qin went back decades before Ying Zheng was even born. 30 years earlier, a Qin general named Bai Qi had trapped an entire Zhao army and forced its surrender. Then, in one single order, he had every surrendered soldier buried alive. Historians say the number killed that day was over 400,000 men. 400,000, buried decades before Ying Zheng ever took the throne. But Zhao never stopped fearing Qin because of it. Word of that slaughter spread fast, and it terrified everyone left standing. Some kingdoms tried to fight smarter instead of harder. One even sent an assassin disguised as a peace envoy. He unrolled a map in front of the king, and inside it was a poisoned blade. Ying Zheng barely escaped with his life, sprinting around his own throne. He survived, and his response was even more ruthless conquest. One by one, Wei, Chu, and Yan fell beneath the Qin armies. Only one kingdom was left standing, Qi, in the Far East. Qi hadn't fought in years, and it believed it was safe. That belief was its downfall. In 221 BCE, Qin's forces marched straight into Qi's capital. Qi surrendered without a real fight, and just like that, 6 kingdoms had fallen to one man's ambition. Ying Zheng stood where 7 warring nations used to be, and there was only one. He didn't want to be called king anymore. Kings were common. He invented an entirely new title for himself: Emperor. Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a united China. No one in the history of this land had ever held that kind of power. And he wasn't finished. He wanted to reshape the entire country in his image. New roads, new laws, one language, one currency, stretching from coast to mountains. But absolute power was about to lead him somewhere far darker than any battlefield. First, he had to make sure this empire couldn't just fall apart behind him. So he tore down the old noble families who might rebel. Over 120,000 of them were forced to move to the capital, where he could watch them. Then he split the empire into 36 regions, each one run by his own hand-picked officials. No local kings, no inherited titles, just loyal men who answered only to him. Every region used the same laws, the same weights, the same measurements. Even the width between cart wheels was standardized, so every road fit every wagon. And the writing itself changed. One script replacing dozens of regional versions. For the first time, a farmer in the east could read a decree from the west. It sounds efficient, but building it cost lives most people never hear about. Because Ying Zheng's next project would demand more workers than any before it. The northern border was under constant threat from raiding nomads, so he ordered old defensive walls connected into one massive barrier. Historians believe as many as 300,000 soldiers and 1 million laborers worked on it. It stretched thousands of miles through desert, mountain, and freezing wind. Workers died by the thousands from exhaustion, cold, and collapsing earth. Some were buried right where they fell, inside the wall itself, according to legend. Today, you know it as the Great Wall of China, but back then, it was known simply as a wall built on bones. And the wall wasn't even his most secretive project. Deep beneath a mountain near his capital, something else was taking shape. 700,000 workers were building him a tomb unlike anything on Earth. Not just a burial chamber, an entire underground empire. Rivers of mercury were said to flow through the tomb, mimicking real rivers above ground. And guarding it all, an army made entirely of clay. Each soldier had a different face, different armor, different expression. Historians estimate 8,000 soldiers standing in silent formation forever. Alongside them, clay horses, chariots, even bronze birds and acrobats. This wasn't just a tomb, it was a mirror of his entire empire buried in the dark. And he built all of it while he was still very much alive. Because the thing Qin Shi Huang feared most wasn't rebellion or war. It was simply dying. He'd unified an entire nation, and it still wasn't enough. So he turned his obsession towards something even bigger than conquest: immortality. He summoned alchemists, mystics, anyone who claimed to know the secret to living forever. One of them told him about islands far across the Eastern Sea, supposedly home to immortals and the elixir of eternal life. So the emperor funded massive sea expeditions to find them. Thousands of young men and women were sent and never seen again. No islands, no immortals, no elixir, just empty ocean and broken promises. But Qin Shi Huang didn't stop searching. He turned instead to something his own alchemists could make right at home. A shining silver liquid they called the elixir of life. It was mercury, and he drank it again and again, believing it was strengthening him. In reality, it was poisoning him slowly, from the inside out. His hands began to shake, his mind grew foggy, his skin turned sickly pale. His advisors saw it happening, but no one dared tell the emperor the truth. Telling him he was dying could cost you your head, quite literally. So the poisoning continued, dose after dose, year after year. Meanwhile, the empire outside kept demanding more of him. More roads, more walls, more monuments to his own name. He even set out on long inspection tours across his new empire, partly to show his power and partly out of restless paranoia. He believed enemies were everywhere, even among his own court. So he moved between palaces in secret, hiding his exact location. Not even his own ministers always knew where their emperor really was. The man who'd conquered 6 kingdoms couldn't trust a single person around him. And on one of those secretive tours, far from his capital, his body finally gave out. What happened next, his own court tried to hide from the entire empire. He died in that carriage, far from home, with almost no one there to witness it. And his most trusted advisors made a chilling decision. They wouldn't tell anyone their emperor was gone. Not the soldiers, not the officials, not even his own sons. Because the empire he built had no plan for what happens when he's gone. So his corpse kept traveling, sitting upright in his carriage for weeks. Servants still brought him meals, twice a day, like he was alive. But summer heat doesn't care about secrets. His body began to decompose right there, inside the carriage. So his advisors came up with a desperate solution. They loaded carts full of rotting fish around his carriage. The stench was supposed to cover up something even worse. For weeks, the most powerful man alive traveled the empire smelling like a rotting fish market. And it worked, long enough for his advisors to finish their real plan. Because the throne wasn't going to his oldest, most capable son. That son had been exiled to the northern border months earlier for disagreeing with his father. Instead, the advisors forged a letter in the dead emperor's name. It ordered that exiled son to end his own life. He believed it, and he obeyed. The empire's strongest heir was gone before he ever knew his father had died. In his place, the advisors crowned a weaker, younger son instead. One they believed they could control, and for a moment, it looked like their plan had worked perfectly. But an empire built on fear and forged letters doesn't stay stable for long. The first knife wasn't aimed at a rebel, it was aimed at a fellow advisor. His name was Zhao, and he wanted the empire for himself. He'd been the one who forged the death letter in the first place. Now he turned that same trick on the other advisor who'd helped him. Within weeks, that other advisor was executed on false charges. Zhao Gao now controlled the puppet emperor completely, alone, and he decided to test exactly how much control he really had. He brought a deer into the imperial court and called it a horse. Any official who dared disagree with him was arrested on the spot. It wasn't really about the animal, it was about proving who really ruled. By then, almost no one in the palace dared speak an honest word. The empire's capital had turned into a court of fear, just like Ying Zheng's laws once demanded. Except now the fear wasn't protecting the empire, it was hollowing it out. Outside those walls, the rebellion Zhao Gao ignored kept growing by the day. 2 rebel leaders had risen above the rest, and one of them had royal blood on his mind. His name was Xiang Yu, a nobleman's descendant with a temper as sharp as his blade. The other was Liu Bang, a former peasant with nothing to lose and everything to gain. Together, their armies were closing in on the heart of the Qin Empire. And inside the palace, Zhao Gao finally realized his puppet emperor was a liability. So he sent soldiers to do something no one in the Qin court had ever dared before. They forced the young emperor to take his own life. The throne Ying Zheng built for 10,000 generations had already burned through 3 rulers, and it had barely lasted 3 years since his death. Zhao Gao tried to crown yet another puppet, hoping to hold on just a little longer. But that new ruler had learned exactly what happened to men who trusted Zhao Gao. So this time, the puppet struck first. Zhao Gao was killed before he could seize the throne he'd schemed for. But by then, it was already far too late to save the empire. Rebel forces were no longer just raiding villages, they were marching on the capital itself. And the first one to reach it wasn't the fierce nobleman everyone feared. It was the peasant, Liu Bang, moving faster and smarter than anyone expected. His army reached the gates of the Qin capital first, and the last ruler of Qin made a decision that shocked everyone watching. He walked out, alone, and surrendered the empire without a single arrow fired. The empire built from 6 conquered kingdoms had just handed itself over. But peace didn't last long, because Xiang Yu was still coming, and he was furious that Liu Bang had gotten there first. When his army finally arrived, they didn't come to accept a surrender. They came to burn everything Ying Zheng had ever built to the ground. The palace that once held 600,000 soldiers' worth of ambition went up in flames. Historians say the fires burned for 3 straight months. 3 months of fire, consuming records, treasures, and the last proof of Qin's glory. The dynasty meant to rule for 10,000 generations had lasted barely 15 years. And somewhere beneath a quiet mountain, none of that chaos had reached yet, because deep underground, an entire buried army still stood exactly as it had been left. 8,000 clay soldiers waiting in the dark for an emperor who was never coming back. Above them, the empire he bled 6 kingdoms to build had already turned to ash. But his tomb itself, the one holding his actual body, had never been opened. Not by rebels, not by looters, not by anyone. Because ancient records whispered about something waiting inside for anyone who tried. Rivers of poison, hidden crossbows, traps built to fire on their own. Whether all of that is true, no one has ever confirmed. Because to this day, that inner tomb has never been dug open. The same mercury that poisoned Ying Zheng in life might still be sealed inside with him. Modern soil tests above the mound have actually found unusually high mercury levels, which means the legend of rivers of mercury might not be a legend at all. The man who feared death more than anything might still be lying in the one place no one dares enter. 6 kingdoms conquered, an empire united, a wall built on bones, and a tomb still sealed shut. Everything he built to last forever either burned or is still buried in silence. But what almost happened next, when explorers finally got close to that tomb, is where this story turns truly strange. It didn't start with the tomb at all. It started with a farmer and a shovel. 1974, a drought year, and he was just trying to find water. His shovel hit something that wasn't rock and wasn't dirt. It was a face, clay, cracked, staring straight up at him. He didn't know it yet, but he'd just found the tip of something enormous. Archaeologists arrived within days and started digging carefully. What they uncovered stopped them cold. Row after row of soldiers, exactly where Qin Shi Huang's builders left them. The same silent army from centuries earlier, finally seeing daylight again. And the deeper they dug, the bigger the discovery got. This wasn't a handful of statues, it was thousands, arranged like a real battle formation. Infantry in front, archers on the flanks, officers positioned exactly where a real general would put them. Some historians now believe the total number could be close to 8,000 soldiers. 8,000, an entire army, frozen in clay, waiting underground for over 2,000 years. But the world was about to learn something even stranger about them. When they were first pulled from the ground, these soldiers weren't grey at all. They were painted in vivid colour, red armour, black hair, bright painted faces. But that colour didn't survive contact with open air. Within minutes of exposure, the paint began curling, flaking, and vanishing forever. Archaeologists could only watch as 2,000 years of colour disappeared right in front of them. It meant the grey army you see in photos today isn't how it was ever meant to look. The real army was bright, bold, and terrifying to look at, built to intimidate even in death. And that wasn't the only secret this excavation was about to reveal. Because the Terracotta Army wasn't just soldiers standing in neat rows. Archaeologists found bronze chariots, each one built with astonishing, obsessive detail. One chariot alone had over 3,000 individual bronze parts. 3,000 parts built for a ruler who would never actually ride it. Nearby, they uncovered bronze swords, still sharp enough to cut after 2,000 years underground. Tests showed the blades were coated with a chromium layer, protecting them from rust. A technique some believed wasn't even invented until modern times. Which raised an unsettling question. How far ahead of their time was Qin Shi Huang's empire really? And if the soldiers were this advanced, what did that mean for the tomb they were guarding? Because remember, the soldiers were never the real prize. They were only guards, standing watch over something much larger, still sealed underground. And that something was the emperor's actual burial chamber. Ancient historians described it in staggering detail, centuries before anyone could prove it. A model of the entire empire, built in miniature, deep beneath the earth. Rivers and seas of liquid mercury flowing by hidden mechanical pumps. A ceiling painted with constellations, mapping the entire night sky above him. It was described as a universe built just for one man, sealed away from the world forever. And modern science is starting to prove those ancient descriptions weren't just legend. Soil samples taken above the tomb have shown mercury levels far higher than anywhere nearby. In some spots, levels measured over 100 times the normal background amount, which lines up almost perfectly with the old legend of underground rivers of mercury. It means the tomb probably really does contain a poisoned, shimmering underworld down there. The same substance that slowly killed the emperor in life might still be sealed around his body in death. And that's exactly why, even now, nobody has dared open that inner chamber. It's not superstition holding archaeologists back. It's the actual toxic risk. Opening it could release mercury vapor strong enough to poison an entire excavation team. So for now, the emperor's real body stays exactly where it's been for over 2,000 years. Untouched, unseen, and guarded by an army that never had to fight a single real battle. 8,000 soldiers, still standing in formation, still waiting for orders that will never come. And somewhere beneath them, an emperor still lies exactly where his fear placed him. The man who conquered 6 kingdoms couldn't conquer the one thing that mattered most: time. But his obsession with cheating death ended up preserving something else entirely. A perfect, frozen snapshot of an empire that no longer exists anywhere else on Earth. Every face, every blade, every painted colour, a window into a world gone for 2,000 years. And archaeologists say what's been found so far might only be a fraction of what's still down there. Because the biggest secret of all is still sealed shut, waiting, just like it has for over 2,000 years. So archaeologists went looking for answers a different way, from the sky. Satellite scans and ground radar started mapping what was hiding beneath the soil. What they found was bigger than anyone expected. The tomb complex stretched across an area the size of a small city. Nearly 20 square miles of walls, chambers, and buried structures. 20 square miles, that's bigger than some entire ancient capitals. And the Terracotta Army wasn't even the biggest thing they found. Scans revealed dozens of smaller pits scattered around the main tomb. Some held clay officials dressed for administrative work, not. The final battle came at a place called Bai Qi, and Xiang Yu was already surrounded. Liu Bang's forces had him boxed in on every side. And then Liu Bang's men did something that broke Xiang Yu without a single blade. They sang old folk songs from Xiang Yu's own homeland all night long. His soldiers heard it and thought their home had already fallen. Thousands deserted that single night, convinced the war was already lost. By morning, the fiercest general in China had almost no one left to command. He broke through the siege with a small band of riders running for his life. But every road he took led him back to enemy soldiers waiting. Eventually, he reached the edge of a wide river with nowhere left to run. A boatman offered to row him to safety, one last chance to survive. Xiang Yu refused, saying he couldn't face his people after losing everything. So instead, he turned and took his own life on that riverbank. The war for the empire Ying Zheng built was finally completely over, and the peasant who'd once had nothing was now the only man left standing. Liu Bang declared a new dynasty, one that would actually last. He called it Han, and it would rule China for the next 400 years. 400 years built on the ashes of an empire that barely lasted 15. But here's the strange twist. Liu Bang didn't tear down everything Ying Zheng built. He kept the unified writing, the standardized roads, the single centralized government. The very system built through 6 conquered kingdoms became the blueprint for China itself. Every dynasty afterward, for the next 2,000 years, ruled inside the frame Ying Zheng drew first. Which means the tyrant everyone feared accidentally built something that outlived every empire after it. And back beneath that quiet mountain, his sealed tomb still hadn't been touched. Centuries rolled by, dynasties rose and fell, and the mound just sat there. Legends about it grew stranger with every generation that told them. Some said the ground near it would kill any bird that landed there. Others said the emperor's soul still wandered the tomb, furious and undead. No one could prove any of it, but no one wanted to be the one who tested it either. So for over 2,000 years, fear did what soldiers couldn't. It kept the tomb completely, perfectly sealed. Until a farmer with a shovel, looking for well water, cracked it open by accident. And what followed became one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in human history. 8,000 soldiers, thousands of years old, still standing exactly where they were placed. Every single one of them built to guard a man who feared death more than anything else alive. And yet, in the end, death found him anyway, in a cup of shining silver liquid. The same substance he believed would make him immortal was the thing that killed him. 8,000 soldiers couldn't stop that. 6 conquered kingdoms couldn't stop that. Not even an empire spanning 20 square miles underground could stop that. The most powerful man in the world still died like anyone else, alone and afraid. And his body has been sitting in that sealed tomb for over 2,000 years, surrounded by rivers of the very poison that killed him. Nobody knows exactly what his body even looks like now. Mercury is actually known to slow decomposition, so some scientists believe he might be eerily preserved, which means somewhere down there, the first emperor of China might still look almost exactly as he did the day he died, waiting in a chamber built to be his own private universe forever. And the 8,000 soldiers above him are still exactly where he left them, standing guard over a body no living person has seen in over 2,000 years. Archaeologists say we may never even open it in our lifetime. The risk of mercury poisoning, the fear of destroying it, the sheer size of the site, all of it holds them back. So the tomb just sits there, patient, silent and sealed. Exactly the way its builder wanted it, forever hidden from the world. The irony is almost too perfect to believe. A man terrified of being forgotten built the one tomb no one's ever allowed to see. And that secrecy is exactly what made him immortal after all. Not through mercury, not through elixirs, not through eastern islands full of myths, but through 8,000 silent soldiers that the whole world still comes to see. 2,000 years later, and people still travel across the planet just to stand near his secret. But there's one more piece of this story, buried even deeper than the tomb itself, and it changes everything you think you know about him. Because before he ever feared death, Ying Zheng feared something else first, being forgotten completely, like he'd never ruled at all. So he ordered something almost as strange as the tomb itself. He had his own achievements carved into mountains across the empire, massive stone inscriptions boasting about the man who united it all. Some of those inscriptions still exist today, faint but readable. Proof that he wasn't just obsessed with his body surviving, he wanted his name to survive too, carved permanently into the land itself. And that's what makes the historian who wrote about him so important. His name was Sima Qian, and he wrote nearly a century after Ying Zheng died. Almost everything we know about the tomb comes from his writing alone. The crossbows, the mercury rivers, the painted stars, all from his account. But here's the uncomfortable question historians still argue about. Sima Qian never saw the tomb himself, no one alive had. He was writing based on rumors, court records, and stories passed down for generations. So how much of what he wrote was fact, and how much was legend dressed up as history? That question still haunts every archaeologist who studies this tomb today. Because the mercury readings back him up almost perfectly. That's not something you fake by accident, 2,000 years apart. Which means the crossbows and painted stars might be just as real as the mercury. And that thought alone is enough to keep archaeologists standing outside, not digging in. Because if the mercury story is true, so might the traps be. Nobody wants to be the archaeologist who proves that theory the hard way. So the entrance stays closed, exactly as it's been for over 2,000 years. But there's a second reason China refuses to open it, and it has nothing to do with traps. It happened right here, in the very first pit ever excavated. When those first terracotta soldiers came out of the ground, they were still painted. Bright red armor, black lacquer, painted faces, exactly how Ying Zheng meant them to look. And within minutes of touching open air, that paint started curling away. By the time anyone could react, most of the color was already gone forever. 2,000 years of preservation undone in minutes, right in front of the people who found it. That failure still haunts Chinese archaeology to this day. Because if a single clay statue lost its color that fast, imagine the tomb itself. Silk, wood, paint, maybe even the emperor's own remains, exposed to open air for the first time in millennia. Nobody knows what survives down there, or what would vanish the moment it's touched. So Chinese officials made a decision that surprises a lot of people. They're simply not opening it, not until preservation technology finally catches up. It's not fear of curses, it's fear of destroying history the moment they find it. So the world's greatest unopened mystery just keeps sitting there, patiently, on purpose, waiting for scientists who don't exist yet, using tools that haven't been invented. And somewhere below all of that caution, the emperor is still exactly where he was left. Surrounded by mercury, sealed behind stone, guarded by 8,000 soldiers. The exact same number that's been repeated in every survey since that farmer's shovel first hit clay. 8,000 soldiers, standing for a man too afraid to ever really let go. And that fear is the whole reason we're even talking about him today. Because a man obsessed with being remembered accidentally became impossible to forget. But there's something else buried in Sima Qian's account that rarely gets mentioned. A detail about the tomb's ceiling that sounds almost too beautiful for a place built on fear. He wrote that pearls were inlaid across the ceiling, shaped to mirror the stars. An entire night sky, frozen in stone, glowing silently above his body forever. If that part is true, it means somewhere down there is a sky no living person has ever seen. A universe built entirely for an audience of one dead man. And it's still up there right now, untouched, unseen, waiting in total darkness. Which makes you wonder what else Sima Qian got right, and what else he didn't. Because right now, the only way to know for sure is to actually go inside. And nobody, not one team, not one government, has ever dared to do that. So the tomb keeps its secrets exactly the way its builder wanted. Sealed, silent, and just out of reach of everyone who's ever wanted to know the truth. 8,000 soldiers keep watching, and the mercury keeps waiting, and the stars keep glowing in the dark. But what almost broke that silence, decades after the Terracotta Army was found, is a story most people have never heard. Because in 1981, Chinese geologists went looking, not for treasure, just soil. They were running routine survey tests across the region around the mound, and what came back from the lab made them check their equipment twice. Mercury levels in the soil off the charts, and only in one specific place. Not scattered randomly, but concentrated in a pattern shaped like flowing rivers. The exact shape Sima Qian described nearly 2,000 years before anyone tested the ground. Sima Qian, the same lean scholar in plain grey Han Dynasty robes, had never seen inside that tomb. So let's be clear about what's actually confirmed and what still isn't. Confirmed: the mercury, the scale, the 20 square miles underground. Unconfirmed: the crossbows, the pearl stars, the emperor's actual body. That gap between what we know and what we don't is exactly where the mystery lives, and it's a gap that stayed open for over 2,000 years. 8,000 soldiers were found in 1974. 8,000 soldiers are still standing there today, and 8,000 soldiers are still guarding a door nobody's opened. That number hasn't changed once in 50 years of digging, which tells you just how carefully this site has been left alone. No new soldier has ever wandered off, no chamber's been quietly opened in secret. This is one of the most watched, most studied, and least touched places on the planet. And that tension between fascination and restraint is the whole story now. Because everyone wants to know what's inside, and everyone with the power to look has decided for now not to. That kind of discipline, over 2,000 years, is almost as remarkable as the tomb itself. If this story pulled you in, this is exactly the kind of history we dig into every week. Subscribe to Unlucky History, a new animated history documentary every Saturday. Because this particular story isn't actually finished yet. There's a reason we said that secret was about to get harder to ignore. Because in recent years, scanning technology has taken a massive leap forward. Muon detectors, the same kind used to peer inside volcanoes and pyramids, are now being quietly tested on sites just like this one. Machines that can see through solid rock without ever breaking the seal. Which means, for the first time, real answers might not require opening the door at all. And that changes everything about what happens next. Because if the pearls are really there, this technology could finally prove it. If the crossbows are really there, this technology could finally confirm them too. And if the Emperor's body is still down there, exactly as Sima Qian described, we might be closer than ever to finally knowing the truth. But right now, all we have are the shapes, not the answers. Shadows on a screen, echoes of a story written 2,000 years ago. And somewhere beneath that quiet mound, the real answer is still waiting in the dark. 8,000 soldiers keep standing guard over it, exactly like they always have. And somewhere in a lab right now, someone is staring at a new scan, wondering the same thing you are. What's actually down there, underneath all that silence? Because the closer we get with our machines, the stranger the readings start to look. Something in the innermost chamber isn't behaving the way solid stone should. And nobody's quite ready to say out loud what that might mean yet. So for now, the door stays shut, the soldiers stay still, and the questions keep piling up. 8,000 soldiers, one sealed door, and a shape in the scans nobody can explain. That's where we have to leave this story, for now. Because what those new readings actually mean is still being studied, quietly, carefully. And when they know more, so will we. Until then, the mound just sits there, the way it has for over 2,000 years. Patient, silent, and sealed. Guarding a man who conquered 6 kingdoms and still couldn't outrun 1 cup of poison. 8,000 soldiers remain exactly where he placed them, waiting for an emperor who's never coming back to give the order. And somewhere in that unexplained shape on the scan, a new question is just beginning. One that might finally force someone to open that door after 2,000 years. Or one that convinces them, once and for all, to leave it shut forever. Either way, the next chapter of this story is already being written. Somewhere between a mountain in China and a lab full of nervous scientists. And when that next answer finally comes, you're going to want to be there for it. Because 8,000 soldiers have waited 2,000 years already. What's a little longer when the truth might finally be close? The first emperor of China conquered 6 kingdoms to build this silence. And somewhere beneath that mound, 8,000 soldiers are still waiting for the door to open. So when that door finally does open, we'll be the ones telling you what they find. So let's go back to the one part of this story that's never been in question. The war that made him emperor in the first place. 6 kingdoms, 1 campaign, and 600,000 soldiers on the move. That number was real, documented, counted by his own generals. And it's the same number historians still cite today, exactly as it was recorded then. 600,000 men, marching under one banner, to erase 7 kingdoms down to 1. No legend needed there, that part actually happened. And it's why, 22 centuries later, we're still counting his soldiers. 8,000 clay men, standing in for the 600,000 who once marched above ground. A whole war shrunk down to human-sized statues, buried in the dark. And that's the strange thing about this man. Everything he actually did was already enormous enough. He didn't need myths to make his story bigger. The real numbers alone are the part that keeps people up at night. 600,000 soldiers to build an empire. 400,000 men buried alive in a single order just to break one kingdom's will. 700,000 laborers building a tomb for a man who was still breathing. And 8,000 soldiers made of clay left behind to guard him forever. None of that needed exaggeration. The truth was already the wildest version of the story, which is exactly why the mound itself is still the center of attention today. Not because it needs some dramatic twist to stay interesting, but because a real, sealed, unopened tomb still sits there, exactly as it has for 2,000 years. And that's a mystery no dramatization needs to improve on. Somewhere under that quiet grass, the real emperor is still lying in the dark, surrounded by mercury that's been measured and confirmed by actual scientists. Not folklore, soil data, published, peer-reviewed, real. And that data keeps pointing to the same conclusion every single time it's tested. There's something enormous down there, exactly where the old record said it would be. Nobody's opened it, and honestly, nobody knows when they will. So the 8,000 soldiers keep their post, still standing, still facing east, still exactly where they were placed, guarding a man none of us have ever actually seen. And that's not a twist ending, that's just where the facts stop, which somehow makes it even more unsettling than fiction ever could. Because fiction ends. This hasn't. So while that door stays closed, there's still real work happening around its edges. because those declassified survey notes we mentioned, they were real documents too. An unexplained, dense shape near the outer wall, confirmed by actual radar scans. Not a myth, not a dramatization, an actual anomaly sitting in real survey data. And so far, nobody's confirmed what it actually is. Some records suggest it could be another burial pit, just like the ones already found. Others think it might be something that was never meant to be part of the original plan at all, which means even the parts of this story we thought were finished aren't. There's still ground here that hasn't been walked, and questions that haven't been asked. And every year, new equipment gets a little better at looking without digging, which means somewhere out there, someone's going to get a clearer picture eventually. Maybe next year, maybe next decade, but someone's going to see what's really sitting next to that sealed tomb. And when they do, this story gets a new chapter. Because a man this obsessed with control doesn't just leave one loose thread. He leaves systems, backups, layers, exactly like the empire he built above ground. One law, one language, one currency, and maybe one more hidden structure. It would be exactly like him to build a second secret just in case the first one failed. So the 8,000 soldiers keep standing, and the mound keeps its silence. But somewhere close by, the ground is telling a story we haven't finished reading yet. 6 kingdoms conquered, 1 empire built, 8,000 soldiers standing watch, and 1 door still sealed. That's where the facts leave us, right at the edge of something still unopened. And next time, we go looking for exactly what's buried beside him. Let's close the loop on the number that's followed this whole story. 8,000 soldiers still standing exactly where they were placed. Not a legend, not a rounded guess. The actual documented count archaeologists work from. 8,000 men made of clay, standing in for an emperor who feared being forgotten more than dying. And in the end, that fear is the thing that actually worked. 2,000 years later, and we're all still talking about him. A farmer's shovel cracked open the edge of his secret in 1974. But the center of it, his actual body, still hasn't been touched. Not out of superstition, out of respect for what science still can't safely handle. Mercury readings over 100 times normal, confirmed and published, sitting right there in the soil. A chamber roughly the size of a soccer field, mapped without ever breaking ground. 20 square miles of walls and pits, most of it still completely unexplored. And somewhere inside all of that, the first emperor of China is still lying in the dark. The same man who conquered 6 kingdoms in a single lifetime. 600,000 soldiers marched for him. 400,000 men were buried alive on his order. 700,000 laborers built his tomb while he still walked among them. And 8,000 soldiers made of clay are still standing guard over